Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to the Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Year of the Dragon is over. How can anybody care too much?
Captain Stanley White, commander of the 5th Precinct and the most decorated cop in New York City, has declared war on Chinatown.
I got a complaint about you already.
Today there were 43 gang arrests, 3 gambling parlors raided, 6 sweatshops busted.
You're only meant to shake up the gang kids.
And now, an opening blow at the man who's been called the Godfather of Chinatown, Joey Tai. Mr. Tai, can you tell us if there is such a thing as the Chinese mafia? Mr. Tai, what is your comment? Mr. Tai, do you have any comment?
Let me make this real clear to you right here and now. Joey Tai goes to the mayor goes to me, and the word is lay off.
You think gambling, extortion, corruption are kosher?
What Chinese mafia? The investigation's in your mind.
These people are the biggest importers of heroin in this country.
The point here is you cease and desist.
Nobody wants to win this thing, do you?
You don't like it, resign.
Maybe everybody's right. I'm chasing something that doesn't exist.
when you go to Letterboxd, Andy, what is the first thing you do? The very first thing, like by rote. If you were asleep, you would do this.
Okay, the first thing I do is I always check my activity.
What do you mean by activity?
Well, I click the word activity on the page.
Okay, what does that show you?
It shows me what's happening in the world of people that I know. And so I look at the stream to see if there's anything interesting that people are watching and reviewing, and I kind of go through that. And then I always click on incoming so I can see, did anybody follow me? Did anybody read or respond to my reviews? And if so, then I look at what they thought of the movie, and then I respond on their reviews. You know, it's kind of that whole back and forth
it's real
thing.
Community vibe you've got going there.
Yeah, that's what I love about it is this whole thing where, it's always nice to see what other people that I follow, what they're watching, and I go, oh, that sounds like a really interesting movie. I should put that on my watch list. And or I can see that they gave something that I was interested in, like a 1-star, and go, maybe I'll take that one off the watch list. So it's a great way to kind of track everything.
Well, I'm doing it wrong, and let me tell you why. But I also think that in me doing it wrong, I also would like to talk about a feature that Letterboxd has that not many social services have anymore that I really love, and that is really central to how we as the Next Reel community use Letterboxd, and that is the reviews RSS feed per user. So what I have for you is I take the RSS feed, which is the little RSS logo. When I go to your page and go to your reviews, there's a little RSS logo in the top right of the corner, and I can right click on that and copy it, and I drop that into my RSS reading service, which is in a reader for me, and then every one of your reviews is delivered to my feeds where I read my feeds, which is all my news articles, all the sites that I follow. I also get Andy Nelson's reviews, and I have other people whose reviews get delivered directly to me. I'm doing it wrong because that means I'm not actually commenting on your reviews, but I am reading every one of them.
So you can go, oh, he's back on his Robert Redford kick again.
Why is that? Why is that central? Because if you are a community member on our site, if you're a two-reeler, we will take your RSS feed from Letterboxd and we'll pipe it directly into our Discord community. So everybody is getting your reviews immediately as you post them, which can be regrettable if you screw up or you find you have an outsized loving view of a movie that is widely panned. That's happened. And so it's really great. I think just the way they allow you to interact with reviews in any app, whether it's inside of Letterboxd or outside, is really fantastic.
Yeah, and it does spur a lot of really interesting conversations. And if you want to upgrade your membership at Letterboxd to either the Pro or Patron membership levels, people who listen to The Next Reel can get 20% off that membership. You just go to thenextreel.com/letterboxd, and you can get your 20% discount right there. And that is that even applies to renewals.
I gotta see when my renewal comes up, Andy. I might just take advantage of that myself. Year of the Dragon, Andy. I don't know what I expected going back into this movie in our Oliver Stone origin story series. He wrote The Thing, directed by Michael Cimino, based on the book by Robert Daley. It's a story about a lot of racists. Everybody's a racist in this movie. And relationships are deeply fraught. Deeply fraught. Every relationship, deeply fraught. The movie, I think generally, any movie where you're exploring this criminal underworld that is largely unexplored, right? Or I should say underexplored, with an eye toward authenticity is welcome. And true to the background of the film, Cimino and Stone, they did their due diligence. I mean, they uncovered a lot about the Chinese gangs, which was difficult work, as I hear it, to actually be able to tell these stories. And so it is with that in mind that it pains me deeply to say, I did not enjoy this movie. It was not good as a movie.
I had the reverse reaction to you. I actually really enjoyed this movie. It is fraught with problems. I had real issues with the way that some characters were portrayed and the nonsense with relationships throughout this film. I really struggled with some of the very 80s views of relationships and race. There were a lot of problems that I had with this film. I think perhaps I found a way to kind of separate myself from the story, the general story issues, and just kind of went along with it. And I found it to be pretty interesting. I actually enjoyed what it was doing, what they were trying to do with the story. In the end, I actually walked away from this going, this would make actually a really interesting TV series. Like, they had a lot of ideas that they were putting into the story. And unfortunately, I think that, I don't know if it's, more Stone or more Cimino. I don't know who really I know Stone did a lot of the research, wrote the script, and I know Cimino kind of went in and did a lot of work on it too. But I feel like the story ends up kind of just taking a lot of elements not as seriously as other elements. And because of that, there are just so many problems with the story. But I really enjoyed this idea of, this cop going after this they call it a triad at one point, but I don't think it technically is. I guess it's just a Chinese mob group that happens to be in the Chinatown area of New York City. So I enjoyed it, but yes, it is full of issues.
I want to really hang my hat on full of issues, because I don't know how you can watch this movie and look at any conversation that Mickey Rourke has with one other person on screen, save maybe his wife, who is, I think she is a saving grace, Caroline Cava, in this movie, but find that to be an enjoyable experience. I think it's terrible. And even hearing the way Stone talks about it, the way he talks about the words that are coming out of the actors' mouths, the way, it's clumsy and unrehearsed. Like, all of these things come together to make a movie that I can't, they take me so far out of the story that I can't enjoy the experience at all. I mean, it's a mess. I think it's tough. Apparently, in the book, the protagonist was not a vet, and that this makes a predominant role in Mickey Rourke's character's life, Stanley White, in this. And this was, according to Stone, Cimino had already made The Deer Hunter, and he was all hot on the vet experience on Vietnam, and it had to have an angle of Vietnam. So Stone tried to give him that. And as a result, we have a lot of exposition in this movie about history, cultural history, practical history, the history of peoples moving into other places, the history of the Chinese on the railroads and in the mines, and the history of Vietnam and the Vietnamese, and his role as a soldier there and his feelings about soldiering. And depending on who he's talking to, I often don't know what the intention is of his character. I find it bounces back and forth quite often. It's sloppy. It is
sloppy. It's very sloppy. And to that end, I had to, as I was watching it, I had to kind of step back and go, okay, he's such a terrible character. Like, why is there anything interesting about this guy? He's just so terrible to the people that he's coming into contact with. I mean, I get it. He's a cop, and we've seen plenty of depictions of cops this way, where they're racist, sure, and they're going after criminals with little heed for the law. I mean, it almost is a trope in and of itself, the way the cops that he is portrayed as a police officer here. But he also clearly has these race issues and everything. He kind of lumps all Asians in with each other. He was specifically a soldier in Vietnam, but he very much feels this way about anyone who is an Asian, and he says terrible things. And so I had to kind of step back a little bit and look at him and go, okay, so what are Stone and Cimino really trying to convey with this character? Because he's terrible. And the thing that I think makes him an interesting character, even if it is problematic, is that I get what they're trying to do with him. I see what they're trying to do with this. Is this guy who I think, suffered from his time in Vietnam and really kind of this is a reactive film. I feel like for Stone and Cimino taking people who had served, these Vietnam vets, and he's now a cop, but it still is like something that he can't let go of, and he's letting it influence his job. And I think that that's interesting. And I was able to, once I was kind of able to kind of get past him as this character that I just didn't like at all, I was like, okay, at least I can see what they're trying to do with him. And again, if they were allowed a longer, like a TV series or something where they could really expand on that and kind of explore that character, I think that there could be something really interesting there. It's just, did it come across that well on screen? Not really. And the only thing that I could really pull from was some of the exposition that they had, some of the scripting, where I was able to kind of get that. And it just comes across in the relationships as rough. And that's really all of my issues with this film. I enjoyed the actual investigation that White has into this crime ring that he's trying to track down and stop here in Chinatown. I actually think that's pretty interesting. And watching John Lone as the main antagonist in this, I thought he was very captivating, and I really enjoyed that side of the story. It's just, boy, did I struggle with every time Mickey Rourke had a relationship with anybody, whether it was Tracy, the reporter, whether it was his wife, whether it was his captain, anybody. It just was a real tough time.
And I don't want to saddle this as, Mickey Rourke is a bad actor. And I don't want to saddle this with anybody that this is movies full of bad actors. It's not a movie full of bad actors. It's full of performances that exist at some magical intersection of, a script that was unrehearsed and not made for their performances, not made for their voices, not made for them. I can't watch Tracy scenes. I'm so glad I'm finished with this movie, because I will never watch it again because of her and those relationships. It's so hard to watch her on screen with anyone, let alone Mickey Rourke, who has his own. This is so far from one of his, one of those great Mickey Rourke performances. But I think everybody suffers. Everybody suffers in this movie. Ray Berry, Eddie Jones. It's just full of awkward marbles coming out of their mouths anytime they're on screen together. I think John Lone is one of those characters that to your point, I think this is a fascinating story and world, and I would love to see a John Lone version of this as an extended series. There is nobody else in this movie that I would want to that I would follow into a series. I would not Mickey Rourke, not Ariane, not Ray Berry, nobody. They were bad.
See, and I don't agree with that. I actually don't think that they were bad. I think, if anything, I think that it suffers from the script. I think the actors did okay with what they were given, but I think the script was, it's just a very simplified version. This is my problem with all of the scripting when it comes to writing these characters, is that it all feels just like the most base simplification of the characters, right? That's how everybody talks. That's how everybody reacts to all the situations. It feels like they were coming up with, like when Mickey Rourke's captain is talking to him and he's like, nobody talks like that. It's just like, God, these lines are so stereotypical of lines I've heard far too often out of this type of character's mouth. Like the reporter, Tracy, like every time she's, we have a right, just the stuff that she was saying as a reporter. I'm like, I've seen all of this before. All of the way that these characters are portrayed is just like the most basic level of character writing. Like when she's like, she has this odd relationship that I just don't understand with Mickey Rourke, where they're somehow drawn to each other. This whole, why do I want to have sex with you? Like all this sort of stuff. It's just like, where did this come from? And then they have sex, and then she's just like, I love you. Did you hear me? And I'm like, where did that come from? And I'm like,
Nonsense.
What this is Stone and Cimino. Again, it's just like the most flat base level of just writing that they could do to get the story across. And that's My problem is the writing. I think that, I mean, I don't mind any of these actors. I think that they could all do this given a script that actually had better lines. And that's why, and flesh it out and give more time to it. Give more time to these characters. I was so frustrated with the relationship with Mickey Rourke and his wife because right from the start, it seems antagonistic. Like there doesn't seem to be much love.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you know, she wants to have babies and he's never around and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden she gets killed. And it's like this, his life is over. And I'm like, when did he ever, like, I never saw that relationship.
Yeah. What is that? Like, what are they trying to do? And they had such opportunity, I think, to create one of those great scenes between two great acting partners. And it comes across as clumsy nonsense. No Kramer versus Kramer, but just clumsy stumbling around and revealing almost accidentally important emotional beats in the scene that we should have been able to feel right along with him. But suddenly when like they already clearly their relationship is fraught, very fraught. And then she says, but you missed the target practice. You missed my ovulation window, right? And I did not see that coming at all. Not at all. It was such a surprise that it felt like an unearned surprise. And it was just incredibly frustrating. There are a lot of those. There are a lot of those moments where, like, for example, Herbert, the Chinese undercover detective, at one point, Mickey Rourke Stanley says, he's tough as nails. He'll get it done. Something like that, right? How does he know? At that point, Herbert had been on screen for like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And that was it. I kind of felt like they were setting up this great sort of undercover cop buddy movie, literally then kicks Herbert out of the driver's seat of the car and says, you're undercover now. Bye-bye. And then we're done with him. Like, we're done with him. He's gone. We see him a little bit actually moving trash in the restaurant. So we get a little bit, like one scene of eavesdropping.
He does come back into the story, but it's like, it's very late.
Very late. There is like, how do we know that this kid is tough as nails when our protagonist has no relationship with him? He's the only evidence that we have is that this kid has been at the firing range and missed every shot. He is not tough as nails at all. And yet they're telling us that he is, and they're not showing us anything. It is terrible. Like, that's just bad.
Yeah. And that's Dennis Dunn playing Herbert, who, you know, anyone who's a fan of John Carpenter's films like Big Trouble in Little China or Prince of Darkness would recognize him from those films. Not to mention The Last Emperor, which he was in with John Lowe.
Yes. Yeah.
But this was his first film. So,
and I like him. I like him just fine. I love seeing him. It's great. I wish that he was actually in this movie more. I think there is a movie here that focuses on Mickey Rourke's relationship with him. Mickey Rourke coming to terms with his own internal inherent racism against Asian peoples as a result of working with him and unveiling some of those inner biases and allowing him to learn something and change and come to terms with them and bring down the big Chinese mob. And instead, it's so completely surfaced that they end up having to shoehorn lines like this into the film to remind you that, you know, that there are relationships here that exist. The slingshot relationships of Tracy is just another example of that. Like, he starts out as an antagonist with the media, and he has this great speech about how, you know, what's killing this country is not drugs, it's not it's the media, it's you vampires, right? He does this whole bit, and then he's having sex with her.
Felt very Oliver Stone,
right? Yeah, totally. So it is unearned.
I think that's really just the central failing of the film here is that, and again, why I think if this was something that was a TV series that had a longer time to kind of explore these characters and the relationships and stuff, I think it could be an incredibly interesting film or a story. As it stands, I feel like and it could have even been found a way to work as a film. Unfortunately, I think the way that, I enjoyed it. I still enjoy this film, but the way that the character relationships just all feel so poorly written. They feel just straight out of like screenwriting 101, like, first level type of character development. It just, whether it's the wife or Tracy or any of these characters, I'm just like, this is just almost stereotypical types of characters that are written here with stereotypical lines that you expect them to say. And it falls flat in that regard.
Let's talk just a little bit about Ray Berry, who is his captain, his chief.
Yeah, I'm never quite sure exactly. I know he's above him, but Mickey Rourke is the chief of his precinct.
And then so it goes Mickey Rourke, and then of a precinct chief, and then his captain is Ray Berry, and then there's the commissioner above him.
Well, then there's also the guy who never talks until that one time when he fires him. And I was like, well, who is that guy?
Yeah, he was like a sergeant, I think.
I don't know. I'm very bad with my police rankings, just like the military. I don't have all of those in my head as far as who's who.
If Andy Samberg isn't in it, I'm not interested. So here's the thing. I think this is an area for exploration because it is an opportunity for Stone and Cimino to write a complex human relationship. Now, spoiler, I think it fails, but it is a powerful example of what could have been because we have this character who through exposition we find out has known Connie, Stanley's wife, longer than he's known Stanley, right? They had a friendship. Connie then married Stanley. Stanley now works for Ray Berry's character, Lewis. And now Stanley and Lewis are coming at odds because of the way they're handling this Chinatown problem. That Stanley seems to know that there's something going on. Ray doesn't want to hear it. He just wants everything to go as normal. And there is, again, a whiplash experience of their relationship going back and forth from, we're old friends. I'm glad I could get you this job kind of a thing. Now just do your part to, I'm not going to do my part and I'm going to stand you up in front of the commissioner and you're going to say lines to me like, nobody does that in here. While they're still standing in here in front of the commissioner. Like, what sense does that make? Like, it is just the worst possible blocking of that scene and makes you question the entire relationship complexity that we had, potentially built. Their relationship comes to, I guess, a head/fruition when Connie is killed. And apparently Ray lives next door and has a rifle at the ready with his silk pajamas at all times, like comes running down the street. I just feel like, did nobody stand back and say, turns out this is nonsense.
And see, those are the moments where it's like, when was it established that they had this, that he and Connie had this long relationship? When was it established he lived down the street? Like things like that end up popping up in the screenplay. It's like, oh, well, that I would have liked to have had that developed a little more. Oh, I would have liked to have seen the captain over at their house for a backyard barbecue at some point to kind of establish that he lives down the street. Like these are the sorts of things that in a more well constructed story, in a film just in a story that takes more time and really gives you all those things, I feel like we could have had that well-rounded story. As it is, it feels like all of these things were left by the wayside because what they were really focusing on, which I'm fine that they focus on it, is the crime story, because that's the story I find interesting. I really enjoy watching White trying to figure out what's going on in Chinatown and what is John Lone up to, and I thought they did a good job of like the fact that, is John Lone the one behind it? Is it, who is it? Is it this white powder ma who's up in Toronto? Like, I enjoyed the mystery that they were creating there. I enjoyed that world. And if they had just stuck to that story and even just like left all the relationship stuff to the side and really just had this story about this captain who is trying to clean up this precinct, and, he's new to the place and he's throwing all the rules by the wayside, all these, under the table dealings that had been going on between the cops and the criminals before he got there. And now he's shaking everything up. And if they really just focused the whole running time on that story and just really explored him trying to piece all this together, I think it could have been so much better as it sits with the relationship stuff, miring it down. I really feel that they're leaving it feel underdeveloped because it just all feels so basic.
I struggle with it because I think that the challenge is these iconic detective characters we've seen, like iconic detective characters that have their own troubles. They're alcoholics, they're racist, they're horrible with women, whatever. But they all learn some lessons and move through the world in a way that feels like they're able to transform. I don't get that with Stanley White, and I think that serves to the disservice of the movie, because the final sequence when he says, I don't know how to be nice, and she says, "Oh, you're really cracked," and they kiss and they walk off into, it's like the end of a John Hughes movie. Right.
It's the end. It's like an airplane version ending of like Chinatown, right? They're walking away from this massive thing. Because I was like, what, where did this come from? Right. Like, what is this line that we're all of a sudden getting here?
Right.
I just don't know how to be nice. You're really cracked. You know that? As they walk off arm in arm. I was like,
what are they trying to do with cracked too? Is that an 80s term that we just didn't know?
Oh, might have. Maybe.
They're trying to do this noir thing where they're bringing back terms from the 30s, 40s, 50s, and it doesn't play with her character.
Following up on that, what's interesting is that actually was not the line at the end of the film. In fact, they say those lines earlier in the film, and they just loop them in. If you look at the lips, they're not actually saying those lines. But the studio...
Notice? Are you kidding?
No, the studio didn't like the original line because what he said at the end, which honestly, I guess fits his character, but it still is not that great. But he said, well, I guess if you fight a war long enough, you end up marrying the enemy. And that was his line as they walked off together. And then I'm assuming she still said, you're really cracked. You know that. I don't know. So the studio... did not like that original line. They vetoed it. And so I'm
embarrassed for that line.
They thought it was far too politically incorrect. And so, they didn't think it fit, even though this film, it fits his character. And that's kind of the dark side of this particular story, is that it does fit this terrible character that he was. It's just, it leaves me baffled that Tracy ever saw anything in him at all.
I disagree. I don't think it fits the character. I think the character would have said nothing at all. I think the character wouldn't. I think that is a toss-off bit of weird old racism that no one would have ever said. No one says that.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Yeah, it's a pretty strange little line. Apparently, it was an Oliver Stone line that was in there, so...
Yeah, I believe it. I definitely believe that. Yeah.
Well, I did want to talk about some good things, because I do think that I know that we're talking about a lot of these issues. I still found it enjoyable. And the thing that I really enjoyed was this crime story that we had here. I loved watching John Lone as a part of this family. In fact, I loved the whole crime family. I loved seeing all of the different people in it, like Victor Wong playing Mr. Young, who had that restaurant. And I really enjoyed the way that it played out. I enjoyed the relationships they had. I thought there was a real interest in the levels between the young and the old, and the respect people were playing, and the way that Joey, John Lone's character, like weaves his way in there to get Victor Wong's character out so that he can take over. And then you find out he's the one who's been behind all these things anyway. He's the one who had the former head of the family killed. And now he's setting up these dealings with his, I think it was his cousin who's over in Burma. Where was he? Thailand?
Yeah, he was in Thailand.
And he meets up with White Powder Ma and takes his head, and then he brings his head and throws it at his cousin, and like a lot of really interesting things with that whole story. And so I was really enjoying everything going on with that story. And I loved how they spoke that brilliant blend of like Mandarin, but then they would throw English in sometimes. We talked about this on our film board episode with White Tiger, how they were doing that in that film too. And I felt that felt really authentic. And I enjoyed the way that all of that played out just throughout the story. And especially the way it built to that end at the docks where White confronts them or tracks them down and then confronts them as they're trying to meet to get this shipment of heroin off the boat, leading to that climactic fight up on the train bridge. I really enjoyed all of that story. And if you cut it out, it's probably down to about 45 minutes of the story. But I just found that to be incredibly successful, and it really drew me in. And like even moments like where White they're doing a stakeout and they're listening to the wiretaps that they have in Joey's place. And it's like a group of nuns who I assume are like volunteering to like help out. I was like, why are the nuns here? I don't know. But I was like compelled because these nuns were the ones who were there. And just like those moments, I just like, this is winning me over right here.
You have also recontextualized the movie for me as well. And the fact that there are nuns there is yet another airplane version of a detective movie kind of a thing. Like, I feel like if Frank Drebin was in there, I wouldn't have been surprised. And I think that's because I agree with you. I think and I think John Lone, this is what I was saying earlier, I think John Lone is a standout. And I think that whole storyline is really great because I'm with you leading all the way to the very end, which was not how the book ended and not how the original script had ended. We can talk about that in a bit, but I think what they gave us an action movie ending, they gave us a standoff, and the standoff was good because ultimately that relationship, even though it is a small part of the movie and only one of the many fraught relationships, it is one that had to end this way, and it felt good. And the way he has written, that sort of exuberant public face of their relationships, like, here, let me get you some champagne and let me take care of your family. And the way, Stanley constantly throws that back in his face, I think that, that narrative of their relationship actually works pretty well. To me, and it sounds like this is where you and I differ, to me, that does not redeem the movie overall. But whereas it sounds like it does enough for you.
This is a film I could watch again. I see that it has a lot of issues, but I can at least see what they were trying to do with it, and I can go along with it, even though there are some serious eye roll moments and probably some moments where I'd be okay getting up and going to the bathroom. I don't need to watch this relationship with Tracy right now. I can.
What's funny is that the hard part about Tracy's character is that she lives in a dope apartment.
That is another amazing thing I love. I guess they shot a lot of this in North Carolina. I think Dino De Laurentiis had some studios there and built a lot of the Chinatown there, to the point where Stanley Kubrick, when he saw the screening of this, I think at Cannes, he told Cimino, he's like, wow, you shot New York so well. I love the look of it. And he's just like, well, I hate to tell you, but all of that was shot in North Carolina. And Kubrick was totally fooled by the fact that all of that wasn't, because they really crafted it so well. And so I loved all of that. But yeah, they shot that Tracy's apartment stuff in New York. And that was something Cimino was really proud of, the fact that he was able to get these shots in this apartment. I can't remember where he said the apartment was, but at the top of some famous building where you could get just amazing shots of the city with the bridges. And man, that shot of Tracy when she's, upset about something that Stanley said. And it's in the dark apartment. She's walking around and it's just this silhouette of her because the apartment's black. And you just have this beautiful city at night in this kind of blue light with the city lights. It's just like, oh my God, that was just stunning. Just absolutely stunning.
Really lovely. The nods that they give to the fact that she's a journalist, right? That she has a bed where the footboard is 3 televisions and 3 VCRs. I thought that was. I thought that was funny.
Is she work at the is she the head of the network? And this is her. I was like,
right. I've met a lot of journalists, and I've never met any of them who had a setup like that at home. I mean, even my dad, who ran a television station, didn't have that kind of setup at our house. It just doesn't. It's just too much. But I understand there's a sensory kind of thing you got to push some boundaries there. But
things like that were weird. Like when he brings his people over to her place to do like the stakeout and stuff, they're looking at all the photos and everything. And then I'm like, isn't he like the chief? Like, I've seen and this again goes to my confusion with police roles, because I think of something like Beverly Hills Cop, and I'm like, isn't the chief the one who's always in the office, like desk job, screaming at his cops and detectives who are out there screwing things up? So I'm like, but he's acting like a detective in this, and so
he's totally acting like a detective. And he has that scene where he talks to all of his guys, and they're lined up in rows and columns, and he tells them about how, I don't want to see any cops on the take and all of this stuff. But none of it makes any sense when he's out on the street most of the time.
Yeah, I'm like, I was very confused by that. Speaking of, that scene was also rather offensive, because he tells the guys, if I hear that you're on the take, then I'm gonna take you down myself, or beat you up myself, or whatever. And then that one woman cop is like, well, what if she's a lady? And he's like, well, she better bend over. I'm like, oh my God.
It was horrifying.
Yeah, there were terrible moments. I mean, they do everything they can to make you hate his character. And that's, again, it's not even the fact that they're just making you hate his character. It's that it's all at the most like typecast version of making you hate his character. Yeah. That's what's so frustrating with it.
Why? Yeah. What was the purpose of having us hate his character? I don't understand that. Why do we need to hate him so much?
The only thing that I can go to is that Oliver Stone and Cimino were both using this as a way to kind of, as a reactive writing exercise, almost more than anything, to the frustrations they saw with Vietnam vets and kind of the way that they were reacting to the world. And I just felt like I felt like they were trying to portray the struggles that vets had in returning to life, returning to a normal life, but also dealing with the reactions they now had to Vietnamese, to Asian people. And I felt like they were wanting to tell us something interesting about that. And unfortunately, in the way the story was told, it's like they never got there, ever.
Can I share a few passages from Stone's book, Chasing the Light?
This is his biography? Yeah,
many thanks to Brian Blake for pointing this out. And I want to read just a couple of passages. The first one, I want to read because of the way he talks about his relationship with the story and his relationship with Michael and what Michael was shooting for. Now there was Year of the Dragon to make. Michael, who had already done The Deer Hunter, was dogged about Vietnam and, unlike in Robert Daly's book, wanted to give our detective in Dragon a Vietnam history, which presumably I could supply. What he wanted was a combination of Dirty Harry and the French Connection, a kind of vigilante cop who'd break all the rules, like Tony Montana, and wreak fire and destruction on Chinatown. Discussions and note-taking followed in this giant production office on Union Square, then solo writing sessions in my apartment uptown or in Sagaponack. Michael was a driven soul, priding himself on his monasticism, not unlike his detective hero, whom I'd named Stanley White after a colorful Polish-American LA homicide detective I'd grown friendly with. Michael became obsessed with the real Stanley, who was an authentic ex-Marine Vietnam vet and, like many LA cops, sometimes a great bullshitter. But his heart was in the right place. He'd worked undercover narcotics, yet understood a guy like me from the other side of the fence, who smoked dope and generally distrusted cops, especially narcs. So he goes on talking about what he's trying to establish here and says, and talks about how Michael Cimino went completely authentically overboard in terms of finding the right places and the right texture and, like you say, building out Chinatown. He would call his production coordinator at 3 a.m. and say, meet me in Staten Island at this location at 5. I want to see the sun come out, or give me a full location board on this or that, or this timeline, or this clothing company, or whatever struck him in the moment, Stone says. And to the point that it became rather abusive. He had, it sounds like, a contentious relationship with Cimino and what he was trying to do. On some of the issues in the book, though, when you talk about the very end of the book, this American detective is trying to bring down this Chinese nemesis, and in the book, it's an Al Capone story, right? In the book, he brings him down not because of the murders or the drugs, but in fact because of bigamy. He discovers that the Chinese nemesis was still married to his Chinese wife in Hong Kong and came here and married another Chinese woman. And that happened all the time, apparently, according to Stone, and that he was able to use bigamy laws to bring down this character. And that's how it wraps up in the book. You know, Capone goes down for tax evasion. Tai goes down for bigamy. Dino De Laurentiis hated it. Absolutely hated it. He said, "What is this, bigamy? It's no good. American audiences will hate it." And that's what is born the bridge sequence at the end. That's how because they came back and went for the mano-a-mano standoff at the end. So finally, last point is this passage on his sort of summarizing his experience. "What can I really say about Dragon? I tried, but I was forcing it. The Stanley White character's rants, some quite racist about Asians, though leavened by favorable dialogues about 19th century contributions of the Chinese to America, didn't play out the same way in Mickey Rourke's mouth as they might have with Al Pacino. Why? I think because Michael, as a director, loved excess, like De Palma, but in this case, the rants came out flat out bigoted without the irony that they needed. Was it the script? Partly. But again, as with Alan Parker, after I'd satisfied Michael with the screenplay, I was not invited into the inner circle. Cimino was a control freak like Bregman, who, no question, but his request for authenticity at any hour of the night at any cost was in the end surface, not content. He should have had the writer at the table reading, at the very least, with the actors in the room, and forced us to deal with the screenplay in the traditional way, which is to read lines, to hear them, to rehearse them, if necessary to change them. It works, and to my mind, it's unbelievably sloppy of any film to commit vast sums of production without at least a minimum of rehearsal and revision, even if last minute. I'm sure I could have improved the script if I'd been encouraged to hang at the set, catch the inflections, relate to the actors, but Michael would not allow that. Nor would Mickey Rourke. Unlike Al, he wouldn't even acknowledge me as a participant. Michael was the only god he served, or really cult leader. I don't think I've ever seen such loyalty as between Mickey and Michael, nor for that matter would Dino, in his cheapness, have ever paid me per diem to do so. And having been through that demanding experience of the Scarface set, I wasn't inclined to volunteer. But even if I had, I doubt Michael would have accepted my services. After all, he was a screenwriter too. Instead, he told me, "Go back to Platoon, get it ready." And so I did.
Yeah, he had brought Stone on because he really liked the Platoon script, which Stone had written by now. And Stone came on to this because, and he got paid lower than normal as a part of a deal because Dino De Laurentiis promised him, you do this and I'll get you the funding you need for Platoon. And so Stone came on. And then, of course, Laurentiis could never find the funding for Platoon, so ended up reneging on that deal. And Stone had to go elsewhere, which we'll talk about in a couple weeks. But yeah, I did read that he said that Stone said that Cimino is the most Napoleonic director he's ever worked with.
Yep.
So
sounds like it was not so much a partnership as a service deal. And in spite of, and this is another one where where Stone did due diligence. He was out there having dinner with these crime lords, crime bosses, the uncles. He was out there doing the work of trying to uncover, what was really going on here. And it was apparently extraordinarily difficult to uncover these things. It was very difficult because unlike the Italians, who, there is much more sort of overt, like, yeah, we know things are going on. The police know things are going on. There might be a détente from here to there. But unlike this, just a lot of secrecy, a lot of extraordinary secrecy in the Chinese gangs. And so apart from, getting the gang youths who would commit crimes and they would get caught, but nobody could ever really figure out, as the story is told in the movie, nobody could figure out what was actually going on at the highest levels of Chinese gang leadership. And so I think he really tried to do due diligence to actually tell this new story in this new way. And I really think the results, and it sounds like the way he writes about it, the results were not satisfactory to him.
But I think that's why those elements that I'm so drawn to work so well. Like,
Yes.
I think that everything with the Chinese culture, with the Chinese gangs, like, I find that so compelling. I love that. I love the fact that we have like women in the gangs too. Like, everything about it was so interesting. And it just like the shell around it was pretty sloppy. So
there's
frustrating.
the scene after the two guys, they go in and the two young men, they go in and they shoot up the restaurant where Mickey is, and Mickey shoots them and they come out injured. Which is fine. It's a big action scene. There's lots of glass breaking, and apparently that's not. I don't think he was. Start again. Michael Cimino was apparently deeply moved by the Scarface mirror sequence, so the mirrors are shattering, and so he wanted to have a lot of glass and shiny things in all these big shoot 'em up sequences, and so you can kind of see that nod in this particular sequence. There's just a lot of shooting and bodies, and these two guys at their machine guns, and then they go back to their hideout, and we don't know at this point, but Ty actually shows up at this hideout. And so that's when we are actually able to make the connection that he was behind the shooting at the restaurant. And then he does this little single camera walkthrough of the apartment and says, kind of essentially, you know what to do, clean it up. And we think they're talking about the fact that they actually live in a hovel. They're actually in this apartment, and it's a disaster of like pizza boxes and cans. But really what happens is they go in and they murder the two guys who had gone in and killed the people at the restaurant. And I think that sequence was super taut. It was a highlight of the film, of what the film was able to do well. And I think, to your point, celebrating the crime stuff is, even if that's all we've got to celebrate, is worth celebrating in this movie. It is. Yeah. There is some good stuff in there.
And that's why I think that it's compelling, because that story, even if you just take like all of the stuff with White that is involving that and just leave that in and just take all the other nonsense out, I think it's an incredibly compelling story that builds over the course of the whole stretch of it. Now, question for you. If it were Nick Nolte or Jeff Bridges playing Stanley White, do you think that would have been any better, or would they have had just as much problem as Mickey Rourke?
I think they would have had just as much difficulty as Mickey Rourke. I don't know. Maybe Bridges could have given us something a little bit more nuanced, but you wouldn't have been able to hear him. And Nick Nolte wouldn't have been able to understand him.
Well, maybe, though, they would have had more of a relationship with Stone and actually listened to some thoughts from him. So who knows? Well, yeah, it's an interesting film. I think that there are some serious issues with it. I think it's interesting that Quentin Tarantino says it's one of his favorites, and he says that whole bit at the end with the train tracks, the shootout, is one of his favorite killer movie moments. He says that you forget to breathe during it. And, I think I would agree. I was really surprised, one, the fact that the train hits Joey's car, like that whole thing, and him trying to get out of it. I was like, that was pretty exciting. And then like the way the bridge was lit, the way he's running and it's just him and the light down at the end of it. And then the way they charge each other, shooting at each other. I was totally into that whole ending. I thought it was just fantastic. And they should have ended it like right after that instead of that nonsense that they had afterward.
Oh God, so bad.
Yeah.
So bad. Ariane is Ariane Koizumi Gomez. And she's now a menswear specialist and sales advisor at the Prada Group in New York City.
She didn't act in much. She acted in this, King of New York, Skin Art, and Robot in the Family as a dominatrix. So not a lot of films. And then like she was in one TV episode once. So yeah, I think that never quite. I don't know if she just wasn't into it or what, or she just wasn't getting good reviews. I'm not exactly sure, but I think she would have been fine given a better script.
I think that is absolutely true. And, at some point that spark of, finding really great young actors happens because those young actors are given really great scripts.
Yeah.
But when they're not, you just never see them.
Yeah. That's how they disappear. Right.
Camera. Alex Thompson is man behind the camera.
Not a, is Alex Thompson someone we've talked about before? I don't feel like we have, but am I missing anything?
I don't. Well, let's see. We never talked about Legend or The Saint.
I think when you look at Thompson's, like, especially the body of work that he was DP for in the 80s, from stuff like Excalibur and Legend and Electric Dreams and Eureka and Labyrinth. There you go. We talked about him with Labyrinth.
That's right. That's what it was.
I definitely feel like he was tapping into, and Alien 3. Demolition Man, like some interesting films later in his career. And then like the Hamlet, like the Branagh's version of Hamlet that was shot 70 millimeter. He's definitely a DP who, especially in the 80s, I can see him working with Ridley Scott, and I can see why this film looks the way it does, especially when it's exploring either Tracy's place or the magic of Chinatown. I think that he was able to capture that very, very effectively. And just the lighting, really throughout the film, it almost had like a neo-noirish kind of feel to it sometimes. And I really enjoyed everything about the way the film looked.
I think it was good. I did find there were some choices in again, the relationship stuff. Anytime you have just two actors together, that I felt like, and I think this is also where editing might suffer a little bit. I felt like could have been made more dynamic by doing more with the camera, by being closer in on a character or moving back and forth between these characters, just to give us a little bit more visual spontaneity when we're suffering with the doldrums of this script. And I found myself in my head kind of reshooting it, some of these sequences, particularly when he comes over, this sequence where Stanley comes over to her apartment. Andy, my God. And he starts, and she says, we can't do this. I was just here 4 hours ago having sex with my boyfriend, and his pants fall down.
He takes his pants down, right? Yeah.
Well, he had already undone them. Right? He'd undone his pants, but we didn't see him undo them. And he stands up, and she's still lying on the bed on her back, and he stands up at the edge of the bed, and his pants fall down. And then he proceeds to lie down on the bed and have this conversation with her that I think is just as like banal shot, a two-person scene as you could get. And I kept wanting, like, let me just interact with the camera a little bit. I think if we move back to her and show her while he's talking, if we do some like performative things with the camera, we could maybe make something of this scene that started with his pants falling down, and I was disappointed like the whole way through. I just felt like it was just clumsy. This movie did not do well on my flick chart.
But you can't always fault that to the DP. Like I think a lot of that comes to the director and his choices with the framing that he was wanting. And so I think when it comes to the way that it was lit, and certainly the DP throws in a lot of those sorts of suggestions. But yeah, when it's shot with as much dullness as that particular scene was, or lack of creativity, the fact that she's having this conversation with a man who has his pants down on her bed, should have been shot in a more interesting way. So that like we're watching him as he's laying there with his pants down while they're having this conversation that was more about work than anything. And like stupid. You could find ways to do some of this stuff, so it was actually a little more interesting. But yeah, I agree. I fault Cimino.
I do too. I do too.
So we didn't talk about Cimino much. So I've seen Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, which I really like, The Deer Hunter, which we talked about on this show and I really like, and this, which I think I liked more than you. I never saw Heaven's Gate, and I haven't seen anything that he did after this, The Sicilian, Desperate Hours, or The Sun Chaser. Plus, he did a segment in To Each His Own Cinema, which was a little like short film collection. Have you seen any of those other ones? Are you familiar with kind of him as a director more?
I have not. I never went back and did any more than we did our conversation on Deer Hunter, which I'm with you. I think we really like Deer Hunter.
Yeah.
And so I came into this movie with high hopes, thinking that this is going to be something on the order of Deer Hunter, and I'm frustrated, which makes me, I guess, more concerned about digging into the rest of his catalog. Or not more concerned, but less interested.
Check out Thunderbolt and Lightfoot. That's a great film. I really, really like that one a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. Strong Clint Eastwood and Jeff Bridges film. The music, I thought David Mansfield's music, he's one of those composers that I've heard a few things of his. I never think about him as a composer. And then I listened to this. I'm like, yeah, it was okay. Oftentimes it felt disconnected from the film, and it felt bigger than kind of what the film was. He's somebody that has starting with Heaven's Gate, has worked with Cimino a few times, but it didn't do much for me.
I agree with you. It did not do a lot for me either. But I went in maybe overly pre-apologetic for the music, because I am so, like, it had a lot of the synth and the 80s stuff going on, and I'm not with that tone right now. And I really struggled with it. And so I feel like it just takes me out. I'm not an 80s fan.
I like it in context of the movies generally, and some of the scores I like. This is just one where it didn't connect. So,
yeah, super dated too. How to Do It award season? Did you get any love?
It did, although most of them were at the Razzies, but it did have one win with 10 other nominations. At the Golden Globes, John Lone was nominated for Best Supporting Actor in a motion picture, but he lost to Klaus Maria Brandauer in Out of Africa. I watched that recently because, I'm still going through my Robert Redford movie marathon, and I thought Brandauer was fine in Out of Africa. I actually would have picked John Lone here between the two. I thought John Lone was just spectacular. And you can see why when Bertolucci reached out to Cimino about him, you can see why he's, very readily said, yes, cast him in The Last Emperor.
Yeah, no, I'd certainly agree with that. And The Shadow. Because clearly from this movie, you'd see what evil lurks in the hearts of men. He knows.
That's right. He sure does. Also at the Golden Globes, David Mansfield weirdly was nominated for Best Original Score, but lost to Out of Africa. That's an easy one to say yes. They got it right on that one. Cahiers du Cinema, they nominated for Best Film. It came in third place behind Hail Mary and Detective, both by Jean-Luc Godard. Which I've seen neither of those, so I can't speak to them. But, it was interesting the way that they kind of choose them and rank them like that. And at the César Awards, the French Oscars, it was nominated for Best Foreign Film, but lost to Woody Allen's The Purple Rose of Cairo. I would definitely agree with that. At the Razzie Awards, I did mention this. It was nominated for Worst Picture, but lost to Rambo First Blood Part 2. Worst Actress for Ariane, who lost to Linda Blair for Night Patrol and Savage Island. Worst Director, Cimino, but lost to Sylvester Stallone for Rocky IV. Worst Screenplay, but lost to Rambo First Blood Part 2. And Worst New Star, Ariane, but she lost to Bridget Nielsen for Red Sonja and Rocky IV. Last but not least, and this is an interesting one. This is what it won for, the Joseph Plateau Awards. It won Best Film. Now, I was trying to figure out what the Joseph Plateau Award is. It's an award that's given to honor cinematic achievements in the film industry, but they're restricted to Belgian cinema and Belgian producers, directors, and actors. So this was the very first of these Joseph Plateau Awards. They're awarded by the Flanders International Film Festival of Ghent or Ghent. I'm not exactly sure, but it's an award that they give periodically. It doesn't seem like it's always given, but I was like, Belgian, and I guess I just am not exactly sure what the connection is to kind of Belgium films as far as this film, but there you go. Joseph Plateau Award, it did win.
Did it do any good at the box office?
Well, even after Heaven's Gate, even if it was a few years later, the studio still gave Cimino $21.5 million for his budget for this. Then again, maybe they gave him $22 million, or was it $24 million? It's really hard to say, as there are actually three conflicting sources out there. I'm just going to go with the highest number for our purposes, which is adjusted to $57.1 million in today's dollars. The movie opened August 16th, 1985, opposite Volunteers, I love that one, The Return of the Living Dead, and The Bride. None of the new releases could break past Back to the Future and Pee-wee's Big Adventure, both still holding number 1 and 2 spots respectively. This film landed in spot 5 and stayed in their top 10 for 5 weeks, but it still didn't end up with much of a profit, landing only $18.7 million domestically and $11.7 million internationally, for an adjusted total gross of $72.3 million. But it did better than Heaven's Gate, landing adjusted profit per finished minute of $114,000, giving Cimino cred to make The Sicilian 2 years later.
All right, Andy. I'm going to spoil it. It doesn't do well on my flick chart. I think we should rank it. Let's get it ripped off the Band-Aid.
Why do I have a feeling we're going to have a number of rock, paper, scissors on this one?
I guarantee it.
All right, let's find out.
It is impossible not to have where it is on my chart. Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You'll see all the movies we've talked about on this very show. If you swipe over in your show notes and tap the word flickchart, it'll take you straight to this film in the flickchart database where you can add it to your list and see how it stacks up against ours.
First up, Year of the Dragon or La Cage aux Folles?
La Cage aux Folles.
I'll say La Cage aux Folles. Year of the Dragon or Stripes?
Stripes.
I'll say Stripes. Year of the Dragon or Labor Day?
Probably Labor Day.
I'll say Year of the Dragon.
All right.
There we go.
Let's do it.
One,
two, three. Paper.
Scissors. Year of the Dragon takes it. Year of the Dragon or Star Trek Insurrection?
Insurrection.
Let's see. Insurrection is the one with the aliens that I like so much, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'll say Insurrection. Year of the Dragon or Oliver?
Oliver.
I'll say Year of the Dragon.
All right.
Here we go.
1,
2, 3.
Rock.
Scissors. Oh, Oliver takes it. Year of the Dragon or Say Anything?
Say Anything?
Say Anything. Yeah. Year of the Dragon or Near Dark?
Near Dark.
I'll say Near Dark. Year of the Dragon or Amour?
Amour.
I'll say Amour. Year of the Dragon or Gone with the Wind?
Oh, this is a real Sophie's choice for me.
I somehow don't think you're using that term quite right. In this particular case. Which child do I like the least? You go.
I think I will go Gone with the Wind. Yikes. It's just even if you watch it on
Gone
mute,
with the Wind.
It's a beautiful film. So
no, I mean there's a lot there. It has plenty of issues, but I'll still say Gone with the Wind. Not as many rock, paper, scissors in there as I thought we would. It landed in spot 432 out of 493 on our chart. That is a 12%. Fairly low. Fairly low.
And it's higher than me.
I figured it would the way you're talking about.
How did it do for you?
It did better than that for me. It landed in spot 2041 out of 4559 or a 55%.
Wow, that's really high. I was actually surprised at quite how low it went for me because, like you said, I had an idea where I kind of wanted this to land on Letterboxd, but this dropped to 1396 out of 1487, which is a 6%. And that's pretty low. Is it that low? Is it too low? Once we're down here, we're dealing over nonsense. It is if I go by the algorithm over at letterboxd.com/thenextreel, this should be a half-star movie, which I do think is too low. And on Letterboxd, I'm going to give it a 1 star. I'm not going back to it again. There was some good stuff in the Chinese crime, as we discussed, but you know what? I feel like I can go find that elsewhere in better movies.
I'm going to give it 2.5 stars, and I'll give it a heart. I think there are a lot of problems, but there's also a lot of strengths to it. I found it a very easy watch. I enjoyed it, even with all the eye rolling I was doing at pretty much everything involving any human relationships other than between the good guy and the bad guy.
I am blown away by that. Like, that is you being, I think, legendarily forgiving of quibbles. That may be
I
the
don't know. I
most
can be pretty forgiving. I think generally when I have quibbles, that's when I'm most forgiving. Seemingly, I don't know. I see the issues with the film, and I definitely have them. But I can also see that the filmmakers were trying to do something interesting, and so to that end, I'm like, I have a hard time faulting it too much because I'm like, I can tell where they were going with it. They don't get there, but I think it's interesting. And I was just mesmerized by everything involving John Lone and everything going on in Chinatown. So it was easy for me to.
I just worry that people are going to listen to this and hear you say, okay, anytime two people were on screen talking to each other, it was terrible. 2.5 stars and a heart.
I've rated probably worse films higher and better films lower. So
yeah, right.
What are you gonna do?
Hey, I'm the 2001 guy. What are you going to do? All right.
Exactly.
Where do we go from here?
We're going to be jumping to Salvador, which is an interesting film and a return to Oliver Stone in the director's chair. This is a film he wrote with Richard Boyle, and it's about a journalist in shooting stories down in El Salvador during a revolution, and getting involved in it, as a journalist shouldn't. So my recollection of this is that it's an exciting story, but I haven't seen it since college, so I'm curious to jump back into this one and look at it again.
Outstanding. Never seen it. Excited to see it and see if we get a little bit better experience with the Stone when the movie ends.
Our conversation begins.
Letterbox giveth, Andrew.
As Letterboxd always do.
All right. I didn't know what to do, so I went unrated, but now I realize it could be that this movie is a 0-star movie by this person. It only just occurred to me that may be what I'm seeing. I'm going to read it anyway. Can I?
Do it.
You're the Dragon from Sally Jane Black, who says, if this film were an examination of the psychological effects of the Vietnam War and of racism in general, it would be a masterpiece. Instead, it's a gangster film with just a light dose of the former two qualities, both of which are drowned out in hyper-macho posturing, actual racism, and sexism. While the film does not necessarily paint these as positives, I feel like it fails to deliver fully on how destructive and painful those things are. That said, there are a few moments that are worth noting. The scene where Joey Tai speaks to his connection and presents a head is a classic, badass sort of moment, and the horrifying attack of Mickey Rourke in his home is well done and shocking. No stars, but that it kind of fills it fills out my rants about the movie.
It was a good attack on his house.
Yeah.
I did like that. Again, it's the crime story.
Right.
It works. I've got a 3-star by Molly Leitch that says, drink every time any character says, you people.
That's really good, actually.
Thanks, Molly. I'm going to like that review.
That's really good. All right. Thanks, Letterboxd. It's hard to believe we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a lot of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchase is made through our links. Give us a small commission at no extra cost to you, and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
We covered a lot of great movies that were adapted from other material in Season 10.
Our Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals is where listeners can purchase the source material behind all our adapted film discussions. It helps support the show at no extra cost when you buy through our links.
In our foreign language Best Picture nominees series, we looked at several adaptations, including Z, The Postman Il Postino, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Letters from Iwo Jima.
We hit the high seas with In the Heart of the Sea from Nathaniel Philbrick's nonfiction book for our Aquatic Killers series.
Definitely a weaker entry in that series.
I bet the book is better.
Oh, me too.
Member bonus episodes featured adaptations like Gone Girl, The Russia House, Ivanhoe, The Hot Rock, The Big Heat, and Naked Lunch.
Oliver Stone brought not just original stories, but also adaptations like Conan the Barbarian, Scarface, Year of the Dragon, 8 Million Ways to Die, Talk Radio, and Born on the 4th of July.
Mary Herron's disturbingly insightful American Psycho was adapted from the Bret Easton Ellis book.
You like Huey Lewis in the News?
Oh my God, it even has a watermark.
And of course, more Stephen King with The Mist, The Green Mile, and The Shawshank Redemption for our King a la Darabont series.
Find links to all of these books and more adapted films on our originals page. That's thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports our show.
Get the full list of books that we've talked about and start your next read today at thenextreel.com/originals.